Alright, this is a piece of Madeira Citrine. It's already got a point, which helps with the preforming. So today I have two pieces from the quartz family, Citrine and Amethyst. I'll show you the Amethyst a little later, as I've already dopped it up for another project, but I decided to cut two stones for this test of a new gem design. It is cool when you get a piece of quartz that already has a point on it from Mother Nature, especially since the design I'm working on today is a hexagonal or six-sided design, just like the point of this citrine. From Cristian Horghidan, and the design is called Hexa Triangles. Now, some of you may know Chris from Facebook already. His name on Facebook is Chris Chris. Chris uses both GemCAD and GemCut Studios to make his designs. And by the way, Chris learned both GemCut designing and faceting online, as he is, most likely, the only colored gemstone cutter in all of Romania. Chris has lost track of how many designs he has made over the years, but I really like the look of this one. Chris's inspiration for Hexa Triangles was a spiritual symbol called Merkaba and Flower of Life. Chris was fascinated by the triangles in the drawing, so he started working on GemCAD to replicate this design. And about the same time, Chris was working with frosted facets, experimenting with a kind of a unique aspect of frosting the edges of a facet. And the result was this design called, again, Hexa Triangles. I will flatten the opposite side of the point and attach the dop there. Centa Madeira Citrine is 4.58 grams, so about a little over 20 carats. It's 15 by 12 by 17 right now. We're going to dop it up. Okay, for our Madeira Citrine, what we want to do is ground the top, a flat piece on the top, the opposite of the point. So we're going to put it in our dop. It'd be awful hard to try to balance that point on the bottom dop. So we're going to put it in some clay, modeling clay, putty, whatever you've got, and kind of work it up there. And that way, when we put the bottom dop, we can move the top around, making sure it's flat, and push it down, and then move the top dop off and the stone won't fall off while we put the correct dop on and glue it. So that's the purpose of the modeling clay, putty, whatever you want to use. For our citrine, we've got our transfer jig set up, and what we do is we've already put the modeling clay in the bottom half of our stone. We put the flat part up against a larger piece of dop and kind of center it. The large dop helps us center the stone where we want it, which we get it centered, and then we simply push it onto the other dop, making sure that it's pretty much centered. Then we remove the larger dop and put in a smaller dop and add our two-part epoxy that I've just mixed up. We want to get the epoxy on the dop and the stone. So I start by making sure it's on the dop a little ways up, then make sure there's some on the bottom of that dop, and push the top onto the bottom, tighten it up. Got it running. Like that. Then we just turn the transfer jig over a couple of times until the epoxy starts to harden, and then we'll have our Madeira Citrine ready to facet tomorrow. All right, this is a Madeira Citrine from South America, from Joe H. He says sourced in Brazil, which means he probably was sourced from Brazil, but it's probably from the mines in Uruguay, but I don't know. Got a special design today called Hexa Triangles. by Chris. He's at, we were talking, and he's comes up with special designs. He just spends a lot of time designing cuts, and asked me if I would test cut one of his latest designs, and I said I would be glad to. So I picked a very special piece of citrine. This is internally, I don't see any problems towards the surface. There's a fracture right here that goes in a little ways, and I saw, oh, right there, there's an inclusion. You can see it right there. Other than that, I don't see any problems with zoning. I think this stone will work well. I don't have any set size to make it. Chris works with, or at least this design, deals with frosted facets, which I don't think I've shown you before, so we'll work on how we facet with frosted facets, if I don't know how to say it right. I won't be able to share the design with you. This is Chris's design. He has not released it to the public, but makes friends with Chris and maybe he'll share it with you. Hexa Triangles, let me start working on the pavilion. I'm going to start with a 320 grit diamond topper and preform it a little bit. The stone is already kind of in a hex shape. That's the good thing about when you buy quartz, and when you can get them as points, you can dop them up and go to work on them right away. Okay, I finished the first row, and because this is a test cut of Chris's design, I want to give it a good shot and evaluate the stone, the cut, the design fairly. So I'm going to once again take advantage of the key dop of the Ultratech, and I'm going to put a second quartz stone, amethyst, and cut the design with two stones, and that way we'll see if the design works or not. But you know, it'd be kind of bad if it didn't work in Madeira Citrine, but it's a great design, and I just use Madeira Citrine and it doesn't look right. So let's give it a shot with amethyst. Now with, again, the key dops, the Ultratech, you can set the dop any way you want it in the quill, but the key dop, you see how it goes up and down? Where that V in the bottom here goes into the quill, there's only one way, where it's at the bottom, right there. If I cut both stones with the key dop in the same place, I can interchange the stones all throughout the process, so I don't have to change laps. I'll cut this tier with the 320 lap, and then I'll go, cut the next tier, and then go back to the Madeira Citrine and cut that second tier without changing the lap. So we're gonna take advantage of that key dop. You could do this without a key dop. It'd just be a little bit more difficult, or you'd have to cut one stone after the other. Not a big deal. But let's see what a purple stone and a Madeira orange stone look like with Chris's design. Okay, I've finished preforming with our 360 grit diamond topper. Still have a little ways to go to close up right there, the amethyst, and right there on our citrine. But with the 360, I still have to figure out exactly what grit to frost with. I don't think a 360 is a frosting grit to me. I mean, it's more of a streaking grit. That's not frosted, that's streaked. I may frost with the 600 grit on the pavilion. I have to frost some of the facets on the crown also, and I may use the 1200 on the crown. I don't think a 3000 is a frosting grit, so I think it's between the 600 and the 1200. So I'll start working with the 1200 grit. Everything else I've already done gone over with the 600 grit. And let me zoom that in for you so you can see it a little better. Okay, so and the 360. So these are not going to work for frosting. These may, at least in the pavilion. Let me see. maybe on the crown, the upper half of the stone, I have to frost some facets there. Maybe I'll use the 1200 for that. But anyway, let's continue on with our 600 grit and see how it goes. Okay, I'm just finishing up the pavilion of the amethyst. So I've polished everything except the facets that I'm supposed to frost. And then after polishing them, I'm going back over the frosted facets to make sure they touch at the point. The way Chris recommends it is with a 600 grit lap, and I'm going to use the 600 grit on my second stone. But when I pulled a lot of informal pull with a lot of gem cutters, it's pretty evenly divided. When I asked them what they frost with, about half say the 600 and about half say the 1200. I didn't get anything outside of those two, so it seems like the consensus is either a 600 or a 1200. Now again, Chris says just hold the lap still, no movement, and move the stone back and forth to get the frosting effect. What I'm doing is going about half speed, 300, 250 RPMs on the Ultratech, half my normal speed. Very light touch, just to get that frosting effect with no gouges. So that's what I'm doing, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, I finished polishing and frosting our citrine, and I used the 600 grit on the citrine to frost it. There you go. So between the 600 and 1200, the 600 is much more of a pronounced frosting. It makes it look like more white, I guess whiter or grayer. But I like the 1200 frosting a little better. It looks a little more, I don't know, clean, but we'll see. So one was done with the 600, one was done with the 1200. Now we'll transfer our stones and start working on the crown, or the upper half of the stones. I'm continuing to use the advantage of the key dop feature of the Ultratech dops, and going from one stone to the other as I work through the various diamond grits. So I've just finished the 1200 grit on the citrine, and now I'll go back to the amethyst with the 1200. Now again, I plan to frost the amethyst with a 1200, and I frosted the citrine pavilion with a 600, and I'm going to try 600 on the crown, but if it looks too scratchy, I may go to a 1200 there too. This is a 600 with my laps. Maybe other people's laps are a little cleaner. I don't know. We'll see. But at least a 1200 frosting here, and either a 1200 or 600 here. Okay, I finished polishing and frosting our Hexa Triangle or Amethyst. Previously finished the citrine. The citrine I used a 600 grit to do the frosting, and the amethyst I used a 1200 grit. I'd asked a bunch of facetors, and it came back about even as to who prefers what. Chris, who made the design, recommends 600 grit, not over the 1200 grit. So 1200 makes it a little lighter, and the 600 a little more pronounced. But we'll see. We'll put it in acetone, take the stones out, and take a look at them. Okay, we're not going to use acetone because I use two-part epoxy, and because this is quartz, and it's not a problem with boiling water, so we're going to use boiling water to get the acetone off. I mean the two-part epoxy. Okay, the citrine popped off already. So I just need the amethyst to come off. And it's off. So we do have amethyst off. So that's the boiling water. Now clean them up and take a look at them. So today I experimented with a new design from probably the only gem faceting designer in Romania, and possibly the only at least colored gemstone cutter in Romania, Chris. I experimented with frosting facets using 600 grit diamond on the citrine and 1200 grit diamond on the amethyst. In my opinion, I would agree with Chris that the 600 grit frosting, at least to my eye, looks a little better, it's a little more pronounced than the 1200 grit frosting. Or it may be because I just think this design turned out extremely well in citrine. I like the amethyst also, but the citrine looks like kind of a sunburst. The design itself, I would say this design is not extremely difficult. A new cutter who has, half a dozen stones under his or her belt can tackle this design. But frosting is a bit tricky, and you have to, for at least some of the very thin frosting, either rub the stone across the stationary lap or run that lap at almost its slowest speed, or you're going to overcut it. So if you like the design, go on Facebook and give Chris a shout. Probably lonely being the only gem cutter and gem cut designer in Romania. So I hope you give frosting a try. It has an interesting effect on the finished stones. Happy fasting, everyone.